Despite the impression you might get from the title of this video, one of my favorite games in recent years is honestly Atelier Ryza 2. However, I simply cannot help but feel like it really didn't live up to the first game in some ways. You see, Ryza 1 hit me with a rather surprising storyline, whereas Ryza 2's story was not quite there.
Wait, the story? You know these are video games, right? You're supposed to play them. I, for one, play this with only one hand, while my other hand was wrapped around my...
Yeah, I agree. The gameplay is more important, which is why I ultimately like both of these games. And Ryza 2 definitely edges out the first one in regards to the gameplay. I can't help but pay attention to the text boxes. Okay, I have to read them, and sometimes what I read it's not quite there. Okay, now, Atelier Bos, as the first draft of Atelier Ryza was probably called before they realized Bos isn't even a playable character, it's a really cool game. Prior to its release, I was really worried that Gus seemed to be pining just a bit too hard for the coomer demographic, a strategy that honestly worked out quite well for the sales of this game. But once I got my hands on the game, it absolutely blew my worries away with its tremendously refreshing take on the series. Moreover, I found in it a story that touches upon topics that I genuinely was not expecting. You see, Ryza lives in this very vibrant and magical city, like everything seems to be perfect, aside from that damn bully, Bos, and no one can do anything about him because his father is the richest man in the city. Now, usually you'd think we'd get over this very obviously filler character as soon as possible, but frankly, like Ryza aside and maybe Claudia, Bos is the character that the story focuses on the most. I'd say Bos suffers actually from what I call the Bakugo problem. Like, you are clearly meant to dislike him at first and grow to like him later on, but his impression is so bad at the beginning that by the time the writer wants you to like him, your mind might be set already on hating him regardless of his backstory or development. Which is that Bos used to be friends with Ryza and her gang, but due to an unfortunate misunderstanding, their relationship turned rather bitter, and it simply grew worse over time. So at first you don't really pay that much attention to him, like he simply pops up once in a while and makes you go like, oh, that damn Bos with his mean comments. But you're really like at this point more focused on finding out like what's the deal with like the Clint Kingdom and like what is up with the Oran race, why is there only one of them when she is so breedable, and what is the deal with the Philosha, like these alien invaders who destroyed both the Oran and the Clint Kingdom. And where the game surprised me was by tying all of these elements with our central character, Bos. You see, Philosha destroyed the Clint Kingdom and drove the Oran nearly extinct because they are such pranksters, aren't they? But despite how intimidating they are, they have quite the weakness: water. Yeah, that literally water. Get yourself a super soaker and you might be the greatest hero this game has ever seen. Well, let's be real, like with a weakness as easy to find as water, how exactly will any civilization fall to these morons? Was the Clint Kingdom perhaps as thirsty as the 150,000 people who bought Atelier Ryza on the week it came out? Did the Oran trade in their brains in exchange for being incredibly seductive? Well, that's where the story gets interesting. You see, usually rich people in a story are simply rich, and that's the end of it. Like Patricia in Atelier Ryza 2, you don't have to think about it. But Ryza 1 says, no, rich people are rich for a reason, and in this case it's because Bos's family controls the water supply for the entire city, and as it turns out, the Brunnen family has a fountain that is connected to another world, and this other world has been devastated thanks to its lack of water, because all that water is of course being siphoned into the Brunnen's fountain, so that they can continue to profit from it. Having no water, the Oran were unable to stand up to the Philosha and were driven nearly extinct thanks to the greed of a civilization that simply doesn't have to immediately suffer the same consequences as the lands that they actually exploit. And so the Clint Kingdom abandoned the mainland and created an island where our protagonists live in, surrounded by water so that the Philosha could not reach them. Once Bos meets his waifu, Kylo, who happens to be an Oran, he eventually concludes it's his responsibility to make things right for her. And there's really no need to say anything more about Ryza 1, like this is all great stuff, like this is enough to blow my fucking mind away. Even though the gameplay undermines the idea that it's wrong to steal resources from other worlds by very explicitly having Ryza create gateways to other worlds just so she can hoard resources from those other places, A little narrative dissonance never really killed anyone. Ryza is truly a rock-solid game, featuring a hard-hitting storyline and addictive gameplay, while also being a fantastic entry point into the series for the newfound coomer audience. And basically, it's a home run. Hats off to the masters over at Ghost. Whenever prejudiced people talk trash about Ryza 1, thinking it's all about the thighs and the legs, I can't help but go full Joker mode. You wouldn't get it. It's about Claudia, you dumb fucks. She is the perfect one. But hey, what about Ryza 2? Well, Ryza 2, Ryza's legs, and there's also a fairy is a fine game. Yep, that's it. Roll the credits. Okay, to address the elephant in the room, the reason both games are so different in the writing department is probably because the writer was changed. The person who wrote Ryza 1 is a renowned novelist, mostly known for his work on... Oh, come the hell on, Shakugan no Shana. Seriously, I hated this when I saw it like 15 years ago, and now I'm on his side? I mean, to be fair, most of the reason why I dislike this show is due to Season 2, which from my understanding is mostly anime-only filler episodes. And as someone who likes quite a few light novels with god-awful adaptations, I'm willing to say the novels are probably better than what the anime lets on. Hell, I can kinda see how Boss's character progression resembles that one guy a little bit, you know, the guy who wants to impress his mommy GF, and he's also friends with Brock from Pokemon for some reason. Anyway, while Ryza 1 was written by an experienced novelist, Ryza 2 was written by the same person who wrote Atelier and Sue, which is a fine game. I like it a lot. But to say that these two games feel perfectly in line with each other would be a stretch. So what's Ryza 2 about? Well, Ryza becomes the proud mother of one fairy. The fairy needs mana to survive, and oh no, the fairy absorbed too much mana, and like now there's a portal to hell being open for like the last 5 minutes of the game, even though there's been no stakes at all so far. And now the fairy's gone, like how sad. I mean, I sound a bit unenthusiastic, but I do want Fee to come back for the third game. I was really saddened when it left at the end of the game. Look man, there's nothing wrong with the plot to Atelier Ryza 2. Hell, you can put this story in the Mysterious Saga and it will look like War and Peace compared to Atelier Sophie. But going from Ryza to Ryza 2 is like going from Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises into something as silly as Snyder's Batman v Superman, which to be fair is actually what happened to Batman in real life. Ryza 1 had so much going for it plot-wise that after all these years, I still remember every story beat quite well, whereas try as I might, all I can remember from Ryza 2 is Patty and Tao being a cute couple, and Claudia and Ryza being a super cute couple, and no, not him, not Lent! In Atelier Ryza 1, the most shocking party member storyline to me was Lent, a guy whose father is a drunkard who physically abuses him. I'm sorry, what? We've had some neglectful or less than respectable parents and parental figures in this series, but it's always played for laughs. Here though, Lent is genuinely someone who suffers from having a genuinely awful parental figure, not played for laughs, and he simply craves to become stronger than his father so he can beat his ass and become his own man. And well, surely enough, Ryza 2 will do something even better with him, right? No, not really. Lent shows up in Atelier Ryza 2 as an adventurer who just takes on quests with no interest and has basically lost all fun in his life. And the reason for that is, people did not thank him enough for doing his job. Now look, I know it feels awful when people don't appreciate your incredibly nice gestures, like when you make incredibly smart videos on why otherwise perfectly fine games actually suck because of one technicality that no one freaking cares about. But Lent's story in Atelier Ryza 2 is just so laughable, I might as well only go over him if I really want to emphasize how different these two games are. I mean, come on, in the very first game we already had a storyline where the villagers ask Ryza to make an incredibly strong fishing bait. She does, and then the villagers turn on her and treat her and her entire gang like fucking demons just because the bait stopped working. Through Ryza, Lent has already been through a storyline of people being incredibly unkind to those who are simply trying to help. This story has literally already happened in the previous game and with way better storytelling because we actually get to see the villagers being jerks to Ryza and company. Not just simply not being thankful, but genuinely being absolute dicks towards them. Hell, even the fucking wiki summarizes his story in the first game saying, he realized that adventures are all about challenges and excitement and not doing it for people's approval. which is exactly what he has to learn again in the second game. Good job, writers. Some guy from the wiki paid more attention to Ryza 1 for free than what you were paid to do. L plus ratio plus length kinda looks like Percival from Grand Blue Fantasy. Seriously, am I the only one seeing this? What the hell? Anyway, is Ryza 2 bad? No, not at all. Like I said before, Claudia turning into some kind of gender jealous character is funny as hell. Her not making any new friends for all the years in between the games is super relatable, as I also did not make any new friends in that time or any time ever. Her scenes with Ryza were cute as hell, and to be real, I mostly played as Claudia through the entire game because she is just so much fun to play as. So basically, Ryza 2 is good because Claudia is waifu as hell, and that's what Atelier is really all about. Who gives a shit about the story in any of these games, really? You made it to the end of the video. That's really embarrassing. Please don't ever tell me about it. Do leave a like if you like, as it will inflate my ego. And I'll see you around.